Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. So happy that you could make it. Good morning, good day, good evening, wherever you may be. So happy that you're here. And we're here today to know about ourselves and learn about how to accept ourselves, right? So yeah, this is being brought to you by our unofficial Sri Lankan American Buddhist wellness community. I think that's what our face group is called. Stephanie came up with that name. Awesome. Kudos to Stephanie for coming up with that name. And I'm just gonna introduce myself, talk a little bit about this project and that we're doing. And then Stephanie's gonna introduce herself and also talk about like what brought her to this work. So I'm Sanathavihari Bhikkhu. Some of you might know me. I'm a Theravada Buddhist monk, born and raised in Los Angeles. I've been a monk for 9.5 years now. Yeah, and during this time, I've come across a lot of social, mental health kind of issues, especially with the youth. They felt like they can connect with me, and so I've been trying to help them navigate, those situations of being first generation immigrant, first generation in school, language problems, generational differences between them and their parents, language barriers, all these kinds of cultural, social barriers, and also taboos in society about mental health and other things like this. So that's what kind of brought me into kind of doing these things and kind of stepping out of the robes, right? And coming into this kind of non-traditional space for a monastic to do. And I was so passionate about this work that I said, you know what, I might as well go get a master's degree in counseling psychology so I can be more well-informed, because I also saw a lack of that kind of background and education with the monastics. We have such great intentions and we have the teachings of the Buddha, which are also very awesome. But I feel that modern psychology helps us communicate that better to a modern audience, right? So that's also very useful for people to feel seen, feel understood, heard, right? And also for us to be able to communicate our ideas and even like present the Dhamma in a way that's more palatable to a modern audience. So it's really this kind of need that I saw in the community and people like coming to me and asking me these things, right? Like they felt like they had permission to ask me, they felt comfortable with me as kind of like one foot in, one foot out, right? Like, oh, he's a monk, so he's kind of like us, but he's not like us because he's Latino and he was born in the US, right? He didn't grow up Buddhist. So like I'm in that kind of middle zone where a lot of traditional Asian Buddhists felt kind of comfortable. And yeah, so those are some of the kind of things that brought me to doing this kind of work and doing these. I think this is like our third or fourth kind of meeting that myself and Stephanie have been doing. Yeah, and with that, I'll present to you Stephanie. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you. I'm Stephanie Warusevitane. That's my long last name. I'm born and raised here in Los Angeles. So anyone else who's in Los Angeles, please come and say hello. Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Being someone born and raised in LA, and I'm also Sri Lankan, it's been quite an experience learning about myself, and immersing myself in also Sri Lankan culture. I'm also Buddhist, and so I have that background as well. And so growing up, I was always very into understanding people and just like observing as well as like talking to like different people from different walks of life. I've always loved like talking to anyone from any age, whether it's like elderly individuals or just like the little kid, it just like always like intrigued me. So that led me to, well, first of all, I was going to go into medicine, that and then it led me into actually going more towards like mental health. So I actually studied that in undergrad. So I did psychology at UCSD. And after that, it was like, you know what? I think I want to continue this. I want to go down this path and continue to understand people. That's when I truly solidified my desire to continue along that path. And I got a master's in social work at USC. And now I'm working as a therapist, licensed clinician, and actually, I apologize, almost licensed clinician, and working also as a life coach as well. So I provide therapy and really enjoy doing that. And Bante and I, of course, love this type of stuff and topics and can talk all day about a lot of this stuff, which is why we're here. This is just the beginning in terms of like stuff we are like excited to continue to share with you all. And we're just really wanting to just support everyone with really learning more about themselves and expanding as individuals. And so, um, we're also open to future feedback as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for
Mhm.
sharing about yourself and letting
Of
us know a few
course.
important things that kind of led you to this work. It seems like every time you introduce yourself, I learn new things about you, which is awesome.
Oh,
Like, yeah,
I love
gotta stay on my
that.
toes and stay curious all the time. We can't ever assume that we truly know someone, right? Or ourselves, which is a good
Yep.
segue to what we're going to talk to
Hmm.
next.
That's true.
So now I want to share with you a beautiful Buddhist quote. It's a Zen quote. It says, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be formed by innumerable things." It's like one of the most famous lines from Ehidogen, a famous Japanese Zen monk who traveled to China, hundreds of years ago, because he was so passionate about learning Buddhism, traveled over the seas through Korea into China to learn Zen and then came back. So, some people were really down for the hood to like really learn. Now we could just go online and learn about Buddhism. It's so easy. But people back in the days, they were really down. Anyway, so just a quick overview about what we're going to be talking about today. We're about knowing ourselves and accepting ourselves. It means like learning to look within and being with everything that's there, right? So I'm gonna talk about these different lenses or different views that we can take, right? Like looking out, looking in, broad view, narrow view, and also what Stephanie like really beautiful insight that she had when we are talking about setting this up about the lenses, right? Like the cultural lenses, the ethnic lenses that we view the world through is also important. So we're going to look at that. We're going to learn about self-acceptance and compassion. Stephanie's going to share with us some beautiful tools and models that we can use to go through this very kind of difficult process at times that it can be. Okay, when I was growing up as a little kid in a Mexican American family, you know, I was always surprised to hear this. Like people say, why don't you go to the doctor? Go to the doctor. And then a lot of my aunties and uncles and older people would say, no, no, I don't want to go to the doctor. And then I'd be like, why don't you want to go to the doctor? It's like, well, I'm afraid that they're going to find something wrong with me. And I was like, that's ridiculous. If there's something wrong with you, whether you know about it or not, it's going to affect you. Like, you might as well go and find out, like, so you can do something about it. But many of us are scared to know what's going on with us, right? Whether it's physically or mentally or spiritually, it's scary to look inside. So I just want to acknowledge that in the beginning. You showing up here, give yourself a pat on the back. It's not easy work, even just to show up. Showing up is a big step. So it took a lot of courage to show up here today and making time. You could be watching Deadpool and Wolverine today. Like, it just came out this weekend, but you're here with us. So I truly appreciate it. You sacrificed watching Deadpool Wolverine to be here with us. Oh, you can always watch it after this. But yes, it's not easy to look inside. And that's why I think many of us have hesitated to do this work and to look inside. So I just want to put that out there and recognize that yes, it is a true barrier. And yes, it is scary. And yes, it can be challenging. So we just need to put that out there. It's not like we're going to give you an easy fix today. 1, 2, 3, you're going to be able to look inside, accept yourself and love yourself. No, it's going to take time and it's going to be scary. And if you're scared right now, it's completely rational and valid to be scared. So I want to talk about kind of what I've noticed and how people tend to think about themselves or where they place their worth at. I think in today's society, a lot of our self-worth and a lot of our attention is directed outside, right? Like where I live, right? This is my neighborhood, right? Like, oh, this is my car, this is my phone, these are my friends, like a lot of like material, right? Physical things. A lot of our attention is directed outside, like, oh, this is my degree, I went to this school, I did this, I did that. And because we're so focused outside, we kind of our own self-worth, our own self-value kind of becomes conditioned by external things, right? So if I live in the right neighborhood, then my self-worth is higher, right? My self-esteem is higher. If I have the right friends, if I have the right phone, right? Like if I have any kind of external thing, then I value myself. But what happens if we don't have those things, right? Then we can devalue ourselves, right? We can even start beating ourselves up and being very hypercritical. So one thing that we need to notice is that our current modern day society really places a lot of value on external material things, right? And that's going to affect how we see ourselves. We see ourselves in relation to these external things, to these external measures of value, right? But there's a whole nother dimension, right? There's a whole nother dimension to who you are. And that's the internal qualities that you have, right? Like your beliefs, your values, your morals, all these things are a whole nother dimension that sometimes we neglect. Yes, we can use the external world to measure ourselves and to find worth in ourselves. Yes, it's completely valid. But there's another half to it. We shouldn't only just bias one side. There's a whole nother side that we can look at, right? We can think about how we think about the world, right? You might not have everything nice in the world, but you might notice, you know what? I wish that everyone else has it. That's a nice quality to have, right? I can find value in this kind of altruistic quality that I have, compassionate quality that I have, loving kindness quality that I have, this kind of sense of wanting the world to be just. Those are all things that also give you value as a person too, right? All these internal qualities are also part of what determine how we see ourselves. So it's not only about looking outside, but also about looking inside. That internal looking sometimes can save us from maybe if we see ourselves falling short in the external world, right? So at times, if you feel like, you know what, I don't have all the external things, maybe it's time to look inside and see all the beautiful things, right, that you might have in there, or all the aspirations that you have to make a more beautiful and successful life. That also counts too, right? So that's one main thing that we could take from Buddhism. The Buddha said, right, intention is the foremost, right? Thoughts are the foremost, right? So from a Buddhist perspective, our intention and our thoughts, our motivations, our emotions, these things also count. They also have weight just as much as the outside, right? So we can hold both of these at the same time. We don't have to put too much weight on one thing to the detriment of the other. We can find value in both. And that's kind of what I wanted to point out right in the beginning. So a little bit about external based self-worth. As I was saying earlier, people tend to base their self-worth on external things like appearances, expensive things, job salaries, being accepted by social, religious, and cultural groups, right? And that's valid. That is something that we can use, right, to give value to ourselves or to recognize if we're kind of meeting the expectations that we have of ourselves in this life. But as I was talking about earlier, there's also the internal side, right? Internal based self-worth. Our true worth comes from our actions, words, beliefs, values, and morals. For example, how we serve others, how we treat ourselves, how we hold up to our principles, and references from harming ourselves and others, reframing actually from harming ourselves and others, right? So these internal qualities are just as important and give value to who we are as a person. And how do we do this? I just added this slide right before this because I noticed that Stephanie was giving everyone a lot of tools they can use. I was like, I gotta give people a tool that they can use too. And there's an amazing tool that the Buddha gave us. Nowadays, we know it as mindfulness or vipassana, called satipatthana, looking within. So how do we look within? How do we start this process, right? First, we need to be able to kind of like see that there is a problem, if there is a problem, and also see if there's good things there too. So the first step is to be mindful, to become aware, to become conscious of what's happening. I think we're all pretty good at being conscious of our surroundings and what's going on outside. We kind of overvalue that. So I want to use mindfulness or insight, satipatthana, redirecting it the other way. I mean, if we take the word satipatthana literally, it means sati upatthana. Sati is mindfulness. Upa means close or near, and thana means to place. So what are we doing with our mindfulness? We're directing it within. So this practice that the Buddha gave us of mindfulness, of satipatthana, is an introspective practice. So if we want to begin to know ourselves and begin to accept ourselves, we need to start looking within, right? And it's not only thoughts. Sometimes we think looking within has to be about thoughts and emotions. It's not only that. The first place that we can start is with the body, the somatic experience, right? How is this body doing? How do I feel in this body? Right? Looking inside of this body is a very important step that we need to take in this introspective practice to begin to know, accept, and to begin to know and accept ourselves. The other one is our feelings. And here, feelings just means kind of like when you interact with things or when a certain thought comes up, do you have like a positive association or a negative association or a neutral association with it? We get to see how we feel about things. The next one is affect our mood or emotions, right? We also learn when we look inside, we get to see what kind of emotions we're storing. And these emotions are also stored in the body. So it's also like a physical practice. And we have certain feelings about emotions, like, oh, being scared is not good. Scared is not a good feeling, right? So all of these are kind of interconnected, but the Buddha breaks them down just for analysis, for like, teaching purposes, but they're all really connected. And the fourth dimension of looking inside, of having an introspective practice, is our thoughts, which includes memories, fantasies, the narrative that we have in our mind, any kind of conceptual, intellectual pictures that are going on in our head are all included in thoughts. So if you want to know more about how to look inside, I would recommend that you look into mindfulness. I think many people here are familiar with mindfulness. You can look up mindfulness-based therapies. You can go more traditional and go to like a Vipassana or maybe a jhana practice, or, just do some Zen or anything that gets you to begin to look within, because that's the first step we need to do. To know ourselves, we need to look at ourselves. We need to look within and see what's going on in there. And the insights that we'll gain from this, okay, what happens when we look within? We see how these things arise, how our feelings, our thoughts, how the body feels this way, and why things happen, right? Why we feel this way, why we think this way, why the body is this way. And then we also begin to get this discernment or this wisdom to see, are these feelings, whether bodily or emotional or thoughts, are they for my benefit or not? So are they skillful or not? And then we can, based on our own life circumstances, make a choice to choose the skillful or the unskillful. So these are some of the benefits of having this kind of practice. We get to see how things happen, why they happen, and then we can make a choice by seeing whether it's skillful or unskillful if we continue to feed these kind of mental, physical, emotional patterns. Okay, another thing we need to do is learn how to think outside the box. And here the box, is a metaphor for our own self-view or our view of the world, right? We have a certain view of the world and ourselves that's very limiting, right? It's constricting. And as long as we stay in this limiting, contained view, we'll never grow, right? So like it's impossible to grow within a constricting space. So in order to be able to grow, to expand, to be able to know yourself and accept yourself, we need to think outside the box, step outside the box, so we can grow and expand as a person. So sometimes we might hold a very narrow view of ourselves, right? We might over-fixate with certain categories in which we define ourselves, of our identity, right? I'm this type of person, I'm not that type of person, or because of my race, religion, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, I'm only here, right? But you know what? Actually, humans are so amazing. We're so adaptable. If you look at the history of humans in this planet, we live in like frozen places, in deserts, in jungles, like in lakes and rivers. In Mexico, where my family's from, we built a city on a lake on the water. Like there's amazing things. Humans are so adaptable. We can't be put in a box. We don't have a narrow point of view. Just look at all the different philosophies and religions that exist, how cultures are so diverse. You don't have to be limited into the one that you were born in. You can appreciate it and also be able to expand beyond it. So sometimes to get to know ourselves is to be able to move out of the narrow view that we have of ourselves in the world and to take a broader view, right? And instead of thinking of black and white, we can learn to think in degrees. We can learn to see the world in a spectrum. We can begin to be more inclusive instead of like very hyper fixated on things need to be a certain way. And if I'm only this way or the world's only this way, then I'm good, or then the world is good. And also have realistic expectations. Unrealistic expectations are very narrow. Realistic expectations are very broad because reality is broad. So many things can happen in reality. Like the example that I give about humans, that humans are so diverse. In reality, there's basically like infinite possibilities. It's only in our mind that there's limited possibilities, right? So once we step out of that paradigm and we move into the broad view, we're able to kind of be who we really want to be and expand beyond these kind of narrow views and limitations that are, for the most part, self-imposed, but also imposed by society, family, the world, and others. But we can't control what other people's narratives, right? We can't control what other people try to feed us, but we can control what we say to ourselves and how we choose to see the world. All right, and that brings us to Stephanie's part.
It's beautiful. lots of amazing information. Thank you for sharing all of that. And so I'm going to continue on, just adding some extra information. So Bante basically provided us the bones and the structure, you know, and I'm now providing some of the meat and the organs a little bit more. So we're both combining and we're completing this anatomy together, which I really love about this journey here. So I wanted to start off with just sharing a quote. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I like to tell people a lot, like, growth is not linear, you know, it's not like it goes like this, you know, it truly is like this, you know. But the growth we experience is, you know, if you're learning one new thing each day, you know, you're still moving up. We're still moving on up in that direction, but we just might go like that, you know, but still going up. So that's how it is when we learn about ourselves too. You know, there might be moments where we feel like, oh, is this a setback? You know, are we going backwards? Did I mess something up or whatever it might feel like? But there is still that growth. So the key part we want to share here is that that Bante shared really well is that awareness, you know, like really seeing things clearly through the lens of, you know, mindfulness and really looking at our stuff, right? And so the journey, you know, it's a journey. It's not a destination that we're met, like we're just going to meet the destination, we're there, and that's it. It's truly a lot of this is a journey. And so, you know, as Bante said earlier, like, you know, in our fast-paced world, you know, and we're, you know, we're seeing a lot of things in life, you know, social media and just all these different messages. It can be kind of overwhelming and a little confusing when we feel like, well, who am I? Right? Like, it just can be overwhelming at times. So, you know, the thing, you know, we really want to assist you all with today is, you know, being able to like free ourselves from some of that pressure that our environment might place on us, but even ourselves. So, you know, and that's what I wanted to share when it comes to that feeling of imprisoning ourselves. Like Bante said earlier, like we're in a box, you know, like the four walls around us, you know, and it can impact the way we view ourselves. So even when we do continue to stay small, you know, in the sense like not aligning with our values or beliefs, our passions, whatever it might be, it does keep us small and it creates a mirror to how we view ourselves and some of the self-talk that we might have with ourselves. And that does then shape the way that we view the world as well. So we want to find ways to now navigate this journey in a different way where it's like, okay, how can we shed some light on that now? Slide. Something? Oh, really? Oh, thank you. Sorry. Okay. So and so the question I like to ask myself a lot and, you know, share is, what is your why? You know, what is, you know, the difference, you know, so being able to spot the difference between what you do versus why you do it, you know, and that why is like the driving force of, you know, like why you get up to go to work, you know, why you are going to school, you know, and I think that's something that sometimes we don't stop to think about. That's part of getting to know ourselves, right? It's like you know, I wake up every morning and I go, you know, I wake up super early or I you know, stay up late studying, you know, why do I do that? What's the purpose? And so being able to identify what our why is, or even create a new why is really powerful. So I like to start with just even just that, you know, at the beginning of that discovery's journey, just kind of to like zoom out a bit more, kind of like a drone. So I like to highlight just some difference between two concepts or two terms. So self-concept versus self-esteem. So self-concept is how you view yourself, how you see yourself. It can vary depending on the situation. It involves describing the attributes of yourself that you think you have. Self-esteem is how you value yourself. It's more stable over time, and it involves how people might feel about those attributes. So what I was saying earlier was self-concept. It's more of a broader term, and it's how you know see yourself in the world, and so that's what we want to help with here is that feeling of that more broader sense of self-concept, and being able to really just have a better sense of that so we can navigate the world a little differently and also changes the way that we, maybe even relate to others as well. So some strategies for that I just listed out for you guys that could be helpful for this process could be, self-reflection, self-awareness, um, exercises. So like as Bante mentioned, like, meditation, we could do some journaling. Sometimes I personally like to even just do like a voice note. I don't sometimes like to sit down and do a journaling, I guess session, but more so just walk around and just do a voice note because it just like helps me to keep moving. I like to practice some like self-compassion exercises, which means like maybe it could be just doing something nice for myself, even it could be just going to get a massage or just making myself a nice cup of tea or just even the little things, going for a nice walk. And we want to set realistic goals. So with goals, when we set those goals, we want to make them realistic and easy for us to attain, especially if we're trying to work on ourselves and create this kind of movement. We want to have cultivate supportive relationships, have that support system, just feel that sense of alignment with who's in our, kind of like we're thinking about like a sport, who's our teammate, we want to have those nurturing relationships as much as we can. Challenge that negative self-talk, develop some coping strategies, so tools to help us with the stress, and engage in activities that bring us joy, so finding those things that maybe we did in the past that we hadn't done in a while, so things that we can maybe bring back into our life. Like, oh, I used to dance a lot when I was a kid and I hadn't done that in a while. Don't know why I stopped doing it, but maybe I could just do that again once every 2 weeks or something like that, just bringing that in a little bit can be helpful. And of course, if we need more support, getting more professional help with a therapist or coach if needed. But by, having these, elements in our life more consistently, we can, change the way this, we view ourselves and just have a more healthier self-concept and self-esteem, which leads to more, feelings of self-confidence and just resilience over time. And it encourages us to also want to try new things and just feel more open to like putting ourselves out there or just, just engaging with our environment a bit more than maybe we did before that. So some symptoms of lack of self-acceptance are worrying about people's opinions, which I'm sure we can all say we've experienced this, right? And avoiding conflict at all costs. We maybe just are conflict avoidant or just don't want to deal with the conflict, right? We might think that other people don't like or respect us. We might put ourselves down, might find it hard to make eye contact, or might want to blend with the crowd kind of feeling. So, these are just some things to think about that, like, sometimes this is how this shows up in the sense that like, if, we're not fully feeling like ourselves or like we are fully accepting ourselves. And when I say fully, I don't mean like 100%. It's like more like accepting our flaws even, right? Accepting that, yeah, we aren't perfect, that we have shadows, that we have limitations, that we're just not perfect, right? That can bring up some of these symptoms, where we might want to then um, avoid having people see us, avoid maybe social interactions as much, because we don't want people to see us like this, and so that can again, like I said before, create that mirror back to us, which makes us feel like, if I'm not like this, then I'm not worthy of going outside, or until I get my life together, then I can go hang out with my friends, or go to this um I don't know, gathering or whatever it is, and there's that barrier to us truly accepting ourselves, and allowing ourselves to still do the things that we love. So, and that's a little bit of an extreme example, but this can show up in our life in little ways too, like I'm feeling really sad, and I don't want to, so I'm not going to go to this party, so part of this acceptance journey is, like Bante said earlier as well, is like that, knowing that like there can be two parts to us, that like we can feel this way and the opposite, that we can also accept, that part of ourselves too. It's okay for us to have both. We can be this way and still do the things that we want to do, whatever that might be. Excellent. Okay, so the lens, Bante did go over this earlier, so I'm gonna just briefly state a little bit more about this. So the lens or filter we're looking through. So we all know about filters. So the lens that we look through is really key, in the sense that, like, it's the glasses that we look through. I like to use that analogy a lot. So it's kind of like, what it's good to ask ourselves, like, what lens are we looking through, so that can really help us understand, like, what you know what's your prescription, like, are you looking at it through the lens of somebody else, or through your upbringing, through our shadows. So it can be really helpful to have a sense of that. So that's another way that I like to also approach understanding more about myself, or you know share how you can start that journey. So another thing is also looking at what we're motivated by. Maybe that might be our limiting beliefs, past traumas, fears, anxiety. We might have like a scarcity mindset, or some abundance wounding, maybe some fears about like lack because of how we grew up, fears around lack and loss. So that can be, something to look at as well. That might be the lens that we might be looking through as well. Like, if we're looking through the lens of fear, that's what's driving everything for us. And so it can be helpful to notice that. I'm not going to go through everything on this slide, but again, like I said before, there's, that mindset, two different mindsets here that are shown: gratitude and abundance mindset versus the fear and scarcity mindset. So, in either way, the one on the left, the mindset empowers us to show up our best in life, versus the other one, it minimizes motivation, prevents us from showing up our best. So it can stop us from, maybe either stop us from trying things, or just be the driving force that does drive things, but at the same time it's all based off fear and lack. And also it could be helpful to look at our expectations, like expectations either from our upbringing, our parents, our, in our culture as well, like, there could be certain expectations to have certain types of career goals, or, to be a good person, or whatever that might be, So it's really helpful to look at, what are the expectations that we've had, either been taught, or we've just heard, from people around us, or just the ones that we have for ourselves, and are we setting them too high, where it's like, to the point where they're just so far out of our reach, and how can we make them a little bit closer, you know more achievable, measurable, realistic goals as well. Also, we can look at how often we're self-sacrificing. Are we often sacrificing our needs, and that also does impact how we view ourselves. So I think, look, that's a thing I hear a lot, where a lot of us may want to people please, and we get drained as well. It can also pull us away from getting to know ourselves more, because we are so focused on everybody else. And so I think that's a huge thing that I talked about a lot with a lot of people I've worked with, in the sense, like, this is like a common theme. I've also dealt with this myself. It does affect our self-worth, right? It does change the way we view ourselves. We might sometimes even feel resentful if we're constantly giving, 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 and especially if that's not either reciprocated or appreciated, or whatever happens. But it's good to be able to zoom back and understand why that might be happening, and to see those cycles and patterns. Productivity versus non-productivity, going back to like something I said earlier, where we might be pouring into a cup, and there might be holes in that cup, right? We might be feeling like I have to do so much in order to feel good about myself. It's not enough. I need, once I get to this point in life, then I'll be good enough. What are those messages? So I like to encourage, that type of thought process of like questioning ourselves, like, like what's the motivation behind this, right? Like, feeling of not good enough, like we need more. And so, and also redefining what it means to be productive, because sometimes that can be driven by the external influences in our lives, feeling like we need to prove to our parents or family members that we are always busy, busy, busy and productive all the time. But maybe redefining productive as actually not always being busy, that we have boundaries with ourselves, and we can actually, take time for ourselves, and that actually increases our productivity. I'm gonna speed it through a little bit. So your narrative is the stories you tell yourself. So it's some of the things we say to ourselves. So as the picture shows, the narrative is how we speak to ourselves, our story. So that can influence us as well. And that's why we do some shadow work. The shadow work I like to share is like the monsters in the closet, or the mold behind the walls that we don't like to look at, but we know it's there. And so it does subconsciously, it's like the puppet, it does like dictate our the way we move in life. It might impact our relationships, might impact our choices, our the way that we're driven by fears versus sense of abundance, so that there is that abundance available to us. So doing the shadow work can be really helpful. Continue to talk about that in the next slides. I like this image a lot because I love that concept of the lotus has to go through the mud in order to blossom. So, that's the deeper and thicker the mud, the more beautiful the lotus blooms. So, the shadow work is that. And it's like, so it's not about eradicating the shadow, but understanding and finding a healthy way to express its qualities. So the more we understand parts of ourselves, the more we can show up more authentically in our relationships, in our life. So that's what I highly encourage you guys to do. And this is a shadow work journal that I personally have and I have recommended. I highly recommend you guys to get this. I got it off of Amazon, but yeah, this journal is really great because it's very easy to use. I use it with some of my patients as well. And yeah, it's a great way to start that process of looking at your shadows. So I did say this before, but I'll just briefly, just say acceptance is healing. If there's one thing you can remember, acceptance is healing. This is a great little phrase if you want to remember what to keep focus on. And these are some things you can try. Again, like journaling, trying new things, stepping out of your comfort zone, self-reflection, understanding your values, as Bante said before, and asking yourself questions. So really just, it's kind of like getting to know yourself more, right? So committing to yourself in the journey is that. And, you know, we don't want to attach too tightly, you know, art of detachment. We don't want to attach to our identity too with that death grip, you know, and being able to really allow ourselves to be more flexible. And it's kind of like if you think about like injury, like the more flexible you are, the less prone you are to that. So being able to be flexible really does help. The power of and, as I mentioned before, this is a great tool if you guys want to look up this tool later. It's the power of and. It's a DBT tool used in therapy where we can allow ourselves to accept the two opposites. So, you know, I am, for example, I am not too happy with my career right now, and I'm working towards improving my career. That's just a random example, but you know, being able to embrace growth and you know, knowing that two opposites can exist is really helpful for us. You know, again, starting with that acceptance, creating a firm, you know, better foundation with acceptance is better for us than creating it from a place of lack. And so these are some great statements, examples. So example of, I need to improve myself and I still love and accept myself. Or this is hard and I'm struggling and I'm going to get up and try again. So these are some great examples if you guys need more practice. And radical acceptance is also a great way to also lean into that acceptance. You know, these are some great coping statements that can be really helpful, which I also encourage, you know, you guys to have like on your phone or something. You can always screenshot them. And in times when you're feeling that like disconnect with yourself, as you're learning about yourself, these are great statements for helping you through that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing all those tools like DBT and acceptance and detachment. And I think now, like myself and Stephanie are just gonna have a little conversation about what we talked about, like more natural flowing, and highlight some of the things that we kind of thought are important or that we move through fast to, or some questions I had about like some of the stuff Stephanie shared. And maybe do this for like 5 or 10 minutes and then open it up to the rest of you for you to ask questions. And that's actually my favorite part. Like when I get to connect with you and maybe you ask me a question I don't even know. And that gives me the initiative to like go out there and do research and continue to do the work. So yeah, Stephanie, is there anything that you wanted to talk about or any questions or anything that came to mind while I was talking?
Yeah. So when it came to you know, that more so about the mindfulness and like meditation and like really looking at ourselves, right? I find that like, you know, when a lot of stuff comes up for people that even myself, that it can be challenging sometimes to know what to do with what's observed, you know, like there's, and I mentioned it a little bit too, like that feeling of wanting to push it away. So do you have any tools for that, you know, as we're learning about ourselves, like how to navigate some of the stuff that's scary, you know, and what to do with that?
Yeah, I think like trying to connect this to what you said about expectations, right? It's very
Mhm.
important that we have realistic expectations. So like when people come to learn meditation at the temple or they come to a retreat and they have certain expectations about what mindfulness or meditation is supposed to be like, even though I haven't said anything. When people come and just like sit down, watch the breath, watch the body, I give them the instructions, but I never really say like what they're working towards. They have their own things, you know, whatever they read online or read in a book. And then usually this happens. I was like, how was your meditation? They say, it was horrible. Why? I was distracted all the time. I had all these thoughts, you know, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, yeah, that's just part of meditation. That's what it is. Oh, but I thought meditation was like to get rid of all thinking. I didn't say that to you. Like, when did I ever say you're not a thing? Well, I was distracted all the time. I thought meditation, you're supposed to be like all serene. Like, no, I didn't also tell you you weren't going to be distracted. Actually, when my instructions, I say, when a distraction arises, you make a note, I'm distracted, and come back. Right. So we kind of have these expectations, these kind of like unrealistic views about what things are supposed to look like. So when we look inside, we also hold these expectations like, I'm only supposed to have good thoughts. I'm only supposed to have kind thoughts, right? I'm only supposed to feel good all the time. Like, even the most positive person in the world, if someone in their family dies, they're going to feel sad. If you lose your job, you're going to feel bad, right? Like, some days you feel sick and you're just going to feel bad too, emotionally and spiritually. That's just part of being human. So also, when you come to like maybe journal, you might write down some things that you didn't notice about yourself in the past. And you might be surprised or even shocked or disgusted about the things that you're writing down in your journal, or the things that you see in your own mind when you're practicing meditation. So I think the first thing is to come in with an open mind, to be curious, and let go of those things. It's not until we really kind of make an effort to see what's inside of us and see those shadow parts that we can actually work on them, instead of like pushing them away, ignoring them, or having this like unrealistic view that, only the good things are what's me and the bad things are not the real me, or only the bad things are the real me and the good things are not the real me, right? So I think it's just about the changing of the paradigm, changing our view, changing our perspective, how we think about things. I think that's really the key, because once we're able to change our view, then we're able to work within this new view. So I think that's really what I try to share with people.
Thank you. Because I think that's a thing that happens a lot, where there's that pressure to want to like control the thoughts or to change them, or, and like you said, like that view on it as bad thoughts, or um I need to stop thinking about this, or I don't like it, I need to stop it right now. And that, I like to give that example which I've shared with you the other day, like that it's like trying to say like, don't think about the pink elephant when you're going to think about the pink elephant. So it's like that, it's like just kind of keeps it's there, right? So I think that awareness, like you said, is key.
And
Thank you.
sometimes, like things that we thought that we kind of got over from many years ago will pop out when you look in. So when we do this inner work, when we look inside and we get to know ourselves, we're going to be surprised. Like, man, I thought I was over that. Like, I thought, and I'm not, and that means you still have more work to do. So like some things like that might pop out. And then some people might feel like, oh, I haven't really done any work then, because it's still there. No, you have done some work. It's just, you haven't completely rid it, but you have reduced it a lot. That's why it hasn't come up in a long time. So when we look in, don't be surprised if like something that you thought that you got over a long time ago arises, right? Sometimes you remember beautiful things about the past too that you completely forgot about. So it works both ways, it works both ways. But Stephanie, I want to ask you, like from your experience, as a Sri Lankan Buddhist woman growing up in Southern California, like how do these things about like self-worth work out? Because I hear a lot of stuff, especially for the boys, like you need to be an engineer, you need to be a doctor, like you need to be the perfect Buddhist, and like, oh, for the girls, you always have to dress in white when you come to the temple and be very nice, and then all the guys are just wearing regular clothes. I'm like, that's a very messed up expectation. That why do the women have to be more religious than the men? So there's all these things that are put on you, and I've seen it. And so yeah, how do you navigate through that whole like culture?
That's a good question. Honestly, in the start, like growing up, um, it was very like I guess you could say challenging in some ways, in the sense that I felt like I had to prove myself a little bit, like in the sense like and maintain a certain type of image of like, I'm good person, a good girl, I don't say bad words, I don't, um yeah. And I think, or just, that I have like these goals, I have like a sense of what I'm doing for my future, and all those things. And I think like there's that pressure to just show that part, and I think that can be um that can be a limiting factor, right? Like where it creates this feeling of like, okay, well, I can only show this part of myself, like here, and like if it's not that, then it's like not valid, or it's something of like shame, honestly. I think that's like a huge part that I I'm like a little bit of a wrecking ball, as you already know, but a silent one. But like, I do like to challenge that, and so for me, I always like to you know, understand more about that. And what I would share is that, you can be like confused about what you want to do in your career and still be like a great person. Like, and I think that was what there was like a disconnect that like, oh, you don't have a job, like, or you don't have um you're not in school, like, it's like almost like your value just, or you're not married, like you're not, like you don't have like a boyfriend, oh, like, it's like whatever. And so I think like those are some things that like, as a female, I can say those are like some of the challenges, and I think like there's that expectation to kind of quiet, not quite, but like not show all the colors, at times, not always, but there, has I did experience some of that. And I think it's, that's why it's important that we do this work, that like you can like start to look at those things, because I think we all have had like our own variation of that experience. And like yeah, I think it's looking back now, I know that there's like parts of me that like I didn't get to express because of that, barrier. But at the same time, I think internally I knew that I just didn't want to ever lose those parts of me, and I'm really glad that I didn't, and so, that, like I said before, like mirroring that back to myself, that I wouldn't do that to myself, that lose those parts of myself or lose those colors, was key, and I think that's a huge part of what I like to encourage everyone to do, that like we don't all have to be like cookie cutter people. Like it doesn't have to be like we need to all be the same, or we can't express ourselves. And I think that's what I didn't like, that like sometimes there's that feeling of like we don't want to maybe speak up and say like I don't like that, or that wasn't great, or maybe this could be done differently, or, and I think there's ways that we can do that and speak up for ourselves. And it doesn't have to be like combative. It can come from a place of feedback and our ability to have a voice, and especially as a woman, I think, we should, and why not? And like, it doesn't, again, have to come from that place of it's combative or anything like that. It's just expressing ourselves. So yeah. Thank you for that question. I like that question.
Yeah, even like when I first became a monk, I had all these crazy limiting ideas about what it means to be like a good monk, and I would constantly fail because I was like, I made up this whole thing that my teacher never told me I had to be that way. I never read in the suttas that I had to be that way. I made it up by myself. I put myself in this box. And then I was wondering, why am I so frustrated? Like,
Yeah.
why am I like so claustrophobic right now? Well, like I did it to myself. I put myself in this box because I didn't want to accept that I was just still a person, even though, one of my teachers told me as soon as I became a monk that same day, he says, don't think anything has changed just because you put on that robe. Nothing's changed. You're still the same person.
Yep.
He just pulled me to the side and told me that. So through becoming a monk, I had to learn to accept when I get angry, or when I get sad, or when I get greedy, or when I get lustful, I don't know. I no longer feed those things, right? I don't give food to them and fuel to them like I did in the past, but I acknowledge that they're there, right? And just because they're there doesn't mean that I'm a bad monk, I've seen like, that's part of the things we limit ourselves. We have a certain idea about who we are. And then we see the opposite, and then it kind of like hurts us, right? We get hurt because we're surprised to see these things, but we can have all these things, all these different feelings and thoughts at the same time together. With a lot of especially young Asian girls that come to me, they tell me like, oh, I have this complicated relationship with my mom. Like she did all these things, and they don't really want to say it. They kind of tiptoe around it. I was like, oh, like you're kind of upset with your mom, or you hate her, or something like that. And they're like, yeah, you could say it. Then they'll be like, oh, my mom was kind of a bitch. Okay, cool. Yeah. They're like, I feel so bad for saying that. I was like, but that doesn't mean you don't love her. You can both love her and, you know, have this
Yep.
kind of difficult feeling emotion about her. That doesn't invalidate your love for her, right? And you have to accept that about yourself, that you have both of these things in there. You probably have more. Those are it's just an example. But there's so many things like this. That's part of learning to look within and accepting yourself. That we're full of contradictions a lot, right? We're full of like the opposites, as you were saying, Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're full of stuff that we don't even know we live our lives by until someone else points it out, right? Someone, a friend, your therapist, a teacher might say, hey, you know, I noticed this about you. You're like, oh man, that's true. Like, I didn't even know that about myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many, there's things that we say that are important to us, but actually we don't live by them. You know, it just sounds nice to say it. So like all of that is valid. All of that is true. We can hold all these things. I like to think about ourselves like as a constellation, right? So many things going on, so many stars. We're a constellation, and we don't have to limit ourselves just to like, okay, it's just like these 2 or 3 planets with one star. This is who I am. Like, no, we're this beautiful, vast night sky, right? Right now I'm in Palmdale Desert, and at night there's very little like light pollution. I get to see all the stars. I'm like, that's me, like with all my thoughts and emotions and feelings. I'm just like that, right? I don't have to put myself in such a like little narrow view. So we can hold both the beautiful, the ugly, the bad, the good, the boring, the neutral. All of that is part of us. And that because we might have more than another, a little bit more of one than another, doesn't mean that we're necessarily better or worse. So that's part of learning to accept ourselves, that we're so, yeah, we're just so weird and we have so many things going on at the same time. And that's just part of being a person.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very true. I like the constellation example. Like, it's a good way to think about it. Sure.
Yeah, Stephanie, did you want to say anything before we get into the Q&A and give people an opportunity to ask questions? Oh, wait a minute. I did something. Okay, there we go.
Okay, there we are. Yeah, I was just gonna say in response to what you said, I really resonated with what you said before, like about, just that feeling of being able to accept that like we have different parts of ourselves, right? Like even like when I do what I do for work, like you know, I always know like I'm not perfect. Like I can make mistakes when I do what I do, like as a therapist, or it's there's room for growth, and I think that's the key part of like you know us accepting ourselves is like humility, right? And like knowing like nobody's perfect. Like I don't care like how many degrees we have, like it's like or you have or whatever. It's we're all human at the end of the day. We're all flawed. And I think that's like I do that with myself all the time. Like I those that the two like the and statements, like I said earlier, like being able to say like I have these bad thoughts about this person, and I'm working on dealing with my relationship with this person or whatever it is, but it's like not like ignoring the fact that I feel this way, because I think like a lot of times we can feel shame for like feeling annoyed or angry at, or kind of like like you said with the parent example, like not loving a parent, or feeling like, oh, if I say this, it's like I don't love my parent. But it's like you know being able to accept our stuff as well as others, in knowing like, yeah, you can love someone and they can also be wrong, right? So
Yeah.
and that same goes for us, so I like that comment, because I think like I do that with myself all the time, that like I'm we're always making mistakes, and it's fine, but being able to accept that allows us to be more open to feedback and also growth too. So,
Yeah, life is messy. We're all messy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All
Very
right.
true.
So is there anyone that has any questions or anything that anyone wanted to share in regards to what we were talking about today? Usually if one person asks, thank you, Vanessa, then it opens it up for everyone else.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
It's me. I'm the first person opening it up.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Of course, first I wanted to say thank you for all of this like really great information. I was like taking notes and thinking about questions for journaling and more introspection. I had a question earlier that was kind of like, when we are faced with like a lot of these traumas that come up, especially when we are with other peers who have like really similar type trauma, kind of like what Bante was saying with like girls and their moms, or like just a lot of different identities, and the multitudes that come with those. I found that sometimes the trauma bonding kind of just stagnates.
Mm.
And then it's hard to encourage like one another to push push past that into like introspection or into like doing the growth or doing like the self work. I was just wondering if y'all have any insights on, yeah, how to move past like the trauma bonding between
Mm.
people and reach a, I guess, better like going outside of the box like together instead of staying in the same loop. Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you.
Bante, did you want to go first?
I just want to say it once again, like I said at the beginning, that yeah, noticing that, going through that, like it's scary, right? It's scary first, like even making yourself vulnerable to share it with someone, right? And then it's scary to move beyond that safe zone that you created in that safe relationship. So of course it's going to be difficult to kind of like move out of that trauma bonding. It's natural. I think anyone who's in like in that kind of situation would feel scared, right, to move out of it or find some difficulties moving out of it. So that's just the first thing I want to say is completely just like validate what you're feeling, what you said there. I think that's like the normal experience for anyone in that situation. So how do we how do we kind of work with that, right? I think there's many ways. I think here I like to rely on the Buddha who talked about having good friends, right? So having good friends is already kind of has already shown you that it's beneficial with this person. So maybe you want to find another good friend that maybe doesn't share this experience with you, right? But can still be very empathetic, can be very kind and compassionate, right? And can be there for you to support you in the choices that you want to make on how to deal with this situation, right? So sometimes we might find a friend that's very close because it's very beneficial, but sometimes they're too close and we get a mesh, right? So we might want to find a friend who has a little bit more distance, right? Or can give us a little perspective from a different angle, from a different facet, like a diamond, and then help us out. But I really, truly believe that friends, that community, that family are really the basis to everything in life. It already showed you how beneficial it can be with this like person that you found this trauma bond, right? Now just like try to find another friend, a different perspective. And the more perspectives and the more support we have, in our community, I think that's just really kind of the best way. Instead of telling you like a technique, oh, like, CBT will be good for this or, whatever, like we're people and we need other people and people help people, So I think people is like the best thing that like the best medicine method and thing that we can use to kind of move forward or deal with more situations. But maybe Stephanie has also something that she'd like to share.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like what you said, like, and thank you, Vanessa, for sharing. Appreciate your comment and question. And yeah, as Bante said, like it can feel scary for us to, you know, navigate our way through, either changing the way that we relate to, the group that we are bonded to, right? It can feel maybe in some ways like comforting, and at the same time also feel like it's still harmful too, right? And so I think, the more we can bring awareness to that for ourselves, because I like to also share that, like, sometimes we can't control other people or the way that they talk or the way that they view the world. Everybody has their lens. So that's where I like to start first and foremost. Like we all have, like I said before, like that glasses example, we all have the lens that we're looking through, right? Like your lens versus maybe some of your friends. Even though you do have that trauma bond, there is that still a different lens you're looking through, and you can change your lens. So by what I mean by that is like bringing more awareness to yourself, so like while you even are in that group, maybe, coming into it with a different awareness of yourself, right? That's what you can control, not the group's way of viewing it or the way that they talk, continue to bond in this way. But maybe, what you but what you can do is change the way that you have that awareness of yourself. So maybe if there's typical ways that you might respond to like certain conversations, or maybe certain ways that you typically might I don't know, certain phrases that you might say, like, you know, oh, like about yourself, or maybe about like certain things, situations, maybe you catch yourself this time, you know, and we replace it with something else, you know, and over time that does change the way we view ourselves, the way we mirror that to ourselves, you know. But the key part is honestly just like noticing it, you know, naming it for yourself, accepting that there is that need to bond in this way and that's coming up for us, right? And working towards maybe trying something different, maybe a different way of responding, right? But first and foremost, noticing what's coming up for you, because especially if that's been a pattern of, you know, the way that things have been going, you know, we're kind of like used to that, right? So it can be hard to you know, just create that change right away, and that's not what we're looking for. It's more that progressive change, you know, but starting with the foundation of awareness.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate the answers so much.
Of course, thank you. Anyone else?
Anyone else? Feel free to just jump on in.
All right, I see I could unmute myself. I'm kind of new at the Zoom thing.
Okay.
So my question is, like, going into you know, the teachings of the Buddha and modern day psychology, do you feel like karma or karma, do you feel like it has to do with the cycles that we go through in our life? Like for me, I have ADHD, so I go through like phases where I'm super hyper focused, and then I go through phases where like I have no focus. Yeah, and I kind of find like that, you know, in realizing the cycle, that I'm able to understand myself and work through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Buddha does talk a lot about like our patterns, right? Our mental patterns, emotional patterns, verbal patterns, physical patterns, relationship patterns that we keep going through life over and over and over again. And he does this in order to help us, like Stephanie said, become aware of it, right? Be mindful of it. Oh, look, I keep doing this over and over and over again. And then we can leverage that, right? If it's something that we keep doing over and over again and it's good and beneficial, hey, man, I'm going to keep doing it. You know, now that I'm aware of it, I can use this pattern because it's useful. If it's something that's detrimental, oh, maybe I can work on kind of like breaking down this pattern little by little, right? You can't get rid of it right away. So you notice it, and then you're able to kind of work little by little trying to eliminate it and remove it. So not all patterns are bad. Some patterns are very good. Some patterns are bad. Some patterns are very pretty useless, don't really do anything, just kind of wasting time, right? So I think the first key is like this insight that we have. Oh, wow. You know, when I'm in this state, I tend to do this. Okay, how can I leverage this? Because sometimes, like if you have ADHD, it can be very beneficial for you in some ways, right? You have found it to be helped you in some way. So you can use that in those situations when you find yourself in those contexts where you for yourself know that it's beneficial. Hey, this is the time to go into that mode. And in the places that you have found that is not beneficial, you're like, oh, I see this in me. I need to actively engage with this and find a way that I can navigate the situation. And it's just about repeating this pattern, as Stephanie said, in those 3 phases, right? Like going through these 3 phases over and over and over and over and over again. And then you like defeat the pattern. It changes. So like I did martial arts and dance my whole life. And it's just about doing it over and over. And then next thing you know, your body just knows it. Like the dance moves, you don't have to think about it. You just dance, right? The martial art move, the kata, you just do it because you've done it over and over and over and over again. So that's the key. It's just like repetition, not only in this life, but the next life and the next life. So from the Buddhist perspective, we have to keep on working with these patterns for many lives. Even the lives themselves are patterns from previous lives, right? So like to me, when I see from the Buddhist perspective that we've been doing this for many lives, it kind of gives me permission to be very humble and not to take it too personally. Like, oh man, like this is such a big job. Of course, it's going to take a long time to get over it, right? Like, of course, it's not that I'm weak. It's not that I'm incapable. It's not that I'm dumb. It's just like there's so much there and it's just going to take such a long time. So of course, I'm not able to succeed next week or next month. So to me, this kind of perspective of multiple lives kind of brings me a great sense of relief that like, oh, I'm not like a loser, I'm not incapable, I'm not dumb. It's just that like there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for that question. And yeah, I was gonna share similarly, like, you know, we want to, yeah, there's certain patterns that we might have, right? And sometimes we might want to, you know, it takes a little time, you know, or it just takes a like action, you know, like acting on it, you know, any action, you know, or any just awareness of it, right? That in itself is better than if you were, and I always go back to the glasses example of like, if you were looking through one prescription from 2 years ago, you'd be looking through a different lens than you are if you updated it now and it's a whole new lens, right? So, you know, sometimes it just takes some time for us to, you know, orient back or orient to the new change that we're experiencing. But at the same time, you know, if we're just bringing some awareness to some of the patterns, you know, we can sometimes like maybe find a way to interrupt some of the patterns or the cycles that we might go through. And so I like to see it as, okay, what's like a cycle or pattern I've been doing a lot over and over, you know, how can I maybe like, and I sometimes even draw it like visual diagram, you know, like I do this and this is my trigger and I end up doing this thing over again and I end up like doing this and this and this and this and then I avoid procrastinate and it's like the whole thing, right? We're like, oh, like why do I keep doing the same thing over and over? It's like, you know, but if we see it, you know, if we name it, we can maybe see, okay, maybe if there's something little I can do, you know, it's kind of like if you think about it like a factory line, you know, if it keeps producing the same thing. Oh, sorry, I apologize.
You're good. We hear you.
Technical difficulties. So as we were saying, so yeah, like, you know, if you think about a factory line, if it keeps creating the same thing, maybe we need to stop the factory line and think, okay, what can I do to like change what's being produced, right? So that might be a little change that you just incorporate into your life and it can help you maybe produce something different. So did that answer your question? I'm curious if like there was something else along those lines too that you wanted to know more about.
That answers my question.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Stephanie, I think you shared something very beautiful, and I've also found this very useful. To
Mhm.
write down or to draw, or do a diagram, like do something where you
Yeah.
see it. There's something
Right.
about like seeing it outside of you, right? Like we see the thoughts and the feelings and all these things inside of us, but something about when you see it outside of you, it really helps. So usually like I have a little dry erase board. I have one here on one of my walls, and like I'll just do things. It kind of looks like I'm a mad scientist because it makes no sense to anyone else. But like when I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's right. You know, there's something about doing that. You know, I think that's the power of like journaling or doing like art, you know, and things like this where you express yourself and you get to see it. And then you kind of like have it outside of you. It's kind of, you get more perspective on your own ideas and feelings when you can see it from a distance than when it's inside of you. So that's, I really like that you shared that with us, doing like little drawings or things like that.
Of course. Yeah, because sometimes it's like unconsciously a pattern, right? Like, and you know, if you're especially used to doing it and it's kind of like driven by, you know, just, yeah, those subconscious ways of doing it, like we might not even be aware of it, right? It's like, oh, like until I write it down, it's like, oh, I didn't realize I was doing this whole time. So yeah, and yeah, like you said, there's other ways of also expressing that, like it could be art or whatever, right? But and I said like earlier, like voice notes, you know, sometimes like people don't like to sit and write, you know, if we're more of like active in that moment, you know, and I like to encourage like interchanging between different types of ways of doing that. Like if you want to go on a walk, drive in your car and just record as you're like moving or whatever, you know, that's another way to do it too, like just to get the thoughts out. Yeah.
Anyone
Thank
else?
you for your
I thought I saw
question.
someone else wanting to ask a question right before Art. Was there anyone else?
Yes, I would like to tell you about my journey coming out of the box.
Okay, go ahead.
I used to be in the box in the early 80s. And I come out of the box with this strong desire for knowledge. And what happened to me on my journey, I didn't detach once I moved into something else. And the last 3 years, I found that I was overwhelmed. And what I did was I sat down and I reviewed my life because I just felt tired and discombobulated, because on that journey coming out of the box, I was in the world now, and I was moving fast, and I was just overwhelmed, and I needed to review to figure out where am I going with this, you know? And believe me, everything that I did, I enjoy it. So I started detaching recently because I learned that from Zen. I'm going on to soon be my year in September. And that helped me a lot, because by that time, people were telling me who I am. I'm like, what? You know, and I felt like this puppet, because I said, oh, anything you need to be done, ask Gloria. And that's when I realized I wasn't saying no to nothing. That was the first reality that I wasn't letting go. People had an opinion of me that wasn't true. I just wanted to serve. I enjoy it. And, you know, I'm just skipping along, and, you know, and I just had an aha moment. And now where I'm at now, since I started evaluating and deleting, now my reaction towards people is getting attitudes towards me. Why is that? And I say, well, am I in the wrong setting here? No one, you know, because I voice myself. I used to didn't speak about, I used to be very shy. And what I do sometimes, I shouldn't say sometimes, what I do, I challenge my fears. So I'm not, I don't have that. And I'm can be aggressive at time in a pleasant way, because I don't have a problem fighting for social justice, especially if it's something that I believe in. And I just said to myself, am I talking too much? What's going on here? And I said to myself, I said, I think I'm talking because that's how I hear myself, or I write things down, you know? And this is how I start knowing me, paying more attention to me, being aware, you know? So when I tell people who I am and what I like, I started having a problem. Then they view me as well, you're nobody, you nothing, and this and that. I didn't say that I was. You know what I'm saying? It's just that I spoke about the things I enjoy doing, but I am deleting a lot of things because I'm going into a new door in my life, you know, because I know more about myself. I'm very mindful with my journey every day. So I'm just saying, it's like, it doesn't matter what you do, you have to be okay with yourself, because people always got an opinion, you know, and if your mind is weak, then you become depressed. You know, so that's what I wanted to say, because everything you talk about, I travel that road, right? And it's funny, I was talking to a lady today, she said, well, you know, you shouldn't tell people the things that you used to do, you know, my job experience and stuff. I said, why not? And then I say, some things is public information. I said, the most important thing, I care less what people think. That even made her matter, you know? And I said, reason why is that, because you can't please everyone. The person you please first is yourself. It has to be, you have to be okay with this. If not, people can steal your peace, you know? So that's why I just wanted to speak to say that, because this is a confirmation because I'm pleased with my journey. I'm pleased who I am. And just to be challenged lately because my attitude changed, people give me a rebuttal. So I say, I'm just laughing. I'm just laughing and keeping my joy, keeping my peace, keeping my power. That's it.
Thank you so much, Gloria, for sharing that powerful account with us and some of the things that worked for you. Yeah, so you know, a lot we can learn a lot from other people's experience. So that I feel like this is Gloria gave us like a great invitation to like reach out, right, to other people, and maybe we see someone in our lives who we kind of like they got this kind of thing figured out, right? Or like they went through this experience. Maybe we can reach out to those to that person and learn from them, or even us. Sometimes us sharing our experiences can be something that other people can learn from. So that brings me back to what I said earlier to the first question that Vanessa asked. I said like people, right? Like having that good friend, having that mentor, having that teacher, or you being that mentor or that teacher, or you being that good friend to others, I really feel is like the basis to like any kind of work that we need to do, whether like physical work, right? If we need to build a house, it's better if me and Stephanie work together to build this house instead of me by myself. I won't be able to hold up all the beams. If we need to do like, you know, psychological work or spiritual work in community, you know, it's always the best thing when we engage with others. I feel like that's really the basis of everything. So we're coming to the end now, and I just wanted to check with Stephanie. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we finish today, Stephanie?
No, I think that was it. And thank you, Gloria, for sharing. We appreciate what you shared as well. And I wanted to just add, I guess, in response to what she shared that, you know, yeah, like sometimes we do share things with people that, you know, maybe people don't want to hear, like it could be even our own growth. And so I encourage all of you to, you know, just have that in mind when you're growing and learning about yourself, that if you kind of already know that ahead of time, right, that there is that expectation and understanding that like people may or may not accept or like the versions of ourselves that we're growing into, you know, and that might be healthier versions of ourselves, right? Then it doesn't really shock us as much, you know. And I think if the goal is more to be able to accept ourselves, and so I think if we kind of keep that in mind, if we're not harming anybody, you know, if we're changing and growing and choosing what makes us happy, then, you know, sometimes that does come up. Thank you for sharing that, because it made me think of that as well.
All right. So I just want to thank Stephanie so much for, you know,
Thank
kind
you.
of helping me brainstorm this idea about today's topic and what we're going to do and all the work that she's put into it, and helping me also kind of think about things, and the lovely talk that she gave today and the lovely answers that she gave. And I want to thank everyone here for jumping in also and supporting us. Like I said, you could have been doing other things. And I'm glad more than anything that you showed up for yourself. Like that's the main thing, right? Like to do this work, you have to show up. Like you have to show up for yourself. Maybe you don't show up for other people. Show up for yourself at least, you know? You could do that, you know? You could do that. Also, I shared the link to our Facebook group in the chat. So if you want to see where we post a lot of the stuff and where we can continue the conversation in our Facebook group called the Sri Lankan American Buddhist Wellness Community, right? Yeah. So yeah, thank you all so much. Stephanie, you want to give any parting words?
Thank you, Bante, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and you know, experiences and wealth of knowledge as always. And yeah, I'm really glad we, you know, we're able to share this with you all today. And you know, again, thank you, like Bante said, like thank you for showing up, because you know, it's sometimes, you know, we just hear what we hear here, and sometimes it takes a minute for some of this stuff to marinate. And you know, we threw a lot of information at you guys, so give yourselves a chance to like, you know, sit with what maybe came up for you guys individually as you heard a lot of the stuff, you know. Some of the things that you might want to work on may not even pop up until like later on, you know, and as you're like navigating through the world, you know. And so just keep these things in mind as like just tools, you know. It's just more tools that you guys have in your toolbox essentially. And that like we're not meant to like fix ourselves overnight or even fix ourselves. It's more, again, acceptance of ourselves and improving the acceptance of ourselves. So I hope you guys continue to do that and good luck. And we're here to, continue the conversation, please reach out if you have any questions.
Yes. All right, everyone. Have a good evening, good day, good night, wherever you are. Have a good one,
Thank
and hopefully see you
you.
soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.